Hello, my name is Riley Brennan, and I'm a master's student at the University of Denver. Today, I will be responding to the Schroeder Challenge to rewrite the Miller Test for Obscenity as put forth to me by Dr. Derigan Silver of the University of Denver. So to start, the Miller Test for Obscenity is a test and guidelines for determining whether or not material is obscene as put forth by the Supreme Court of the United States. The test has 3 prongs and it is conjunctive, meaning that a piece of media must meet all 3 elements in order to be deemed obscene. The first prong of the test is whether the average person applying contemporary community standards finds that the work, taken as a whole, appeals to a prurient interest in sex. A prurient interest meaning a shameful or morbid interest in sex. The second prong is that the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law. And the third prong is that the work, taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. This test has received a lot of criticism and some praise. It's good that the test requires that you apply contemporary community standards, because this means that we're not applying the standards of a San Francisco community everywhere or the standards of a Utah community everywhere. We're also not applying the standards of the time when a state law was written or a state was founded, or even just of our grandparents or great-grandparents. We're applying the standards of a community in this time and place. Second, the test requires that you take a work as a whole, so it can't just be one part or one scene or one chapter or one piece of a picture. It has to be the entire work. Now, both of these elements have also been challenged and criticized because the first part, the contemporary community standards, makes it really hard to predict what will be deemed obscene, and it's really hard to apply across the United States because it goes by state and by community. So what's obscene in Kansas may not be the same as what's obscene in New York. It just depends, and so this also has implications for media that's online, because that can be in multiple states, in multiple communities, and may be judged differently in each community. Additionally, the taking a work as a whole piece makes it kind of hard for anything to really be obscene, because if other elements of the work are not obscene, then the entire piece may not be obscene. Finally, the third prong, that a work must have serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. This is difficult because a lot of producers of this content will argue that there's scientific value in sex therapy, which is something that Dr. Silver taught me, and I find that really interesting. I probably would have argued for literary or artistic value, but most people go for scientific value, apparently. So those are some issues with the Miller test and some praise for it as it stands right now. I believe that we do not need to have the Miller test for obscenity because we do not need to have a test for obscenity at all. This test is specifically for obscene sexual material, and I don't think that that's a place that the government should be regulating. The government should not be deciding what is appropriate and inappropriate, whether that's for a specific community standard or a national standard. Sexuality is so complex that the government or a community has no place in determining what's appropriate and what's not. I do think that there is a part of the regulations on obscenity that should continue to apply. And this is in 3 areas: child pornography, rape, and bestiality. So child pornography actually is not technically obscenity in that there are federal regulations for child pornography, and those regulations apply specifically to child pornography and are separate from the Miller test for obscenity. The issue with child pornography in the eyes of the law is that children cannot consent to sex. Similarly, animals cannot consent to sex, but bestiality does not have federal regulations. There are state regulations, but currently 4 states do not outlaw bestiality, meaning sexual activity with an animal. But since animals cannot consent, I do believe that bestiality-related material should also be banned on a federal level. Finally, rape material of real rape, not simulated rape, not acted out rape, not fantasy rape in which people previously agree to a sexual scene and scenario and then act out that sexual scene and scenario as if it were real, but it's actually agreed upon and therefore is consensual. That would not be considered actual rape porn, but real rape porn where a real rape is taking place and there has not been consent, that should be regulated on a federal level. Again, these three things all have in common the element of consent, and because federal regulation is in place to address child pornography, we should also have federal regulation to address bestiality and rape porn. But we do not need a test for obscenity, because anything outside of those three areas should not be considered the interest of the government, because the government does not need to regulate our sexual desires, behaviors, and interests.